All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really big one, a truly cosmic level problem. How on earth would you even begin to understand an alien that exists in a reality completely beyond our own? Okay, so let's really dive into this. It's a classic sci-fi question, right? But the answer isn't just about learning their language. The real challenge is so much deeper. How do you even begin to understand a being whose physical existence, whose very reality, is built on more dimensions than we have? Yeah, because we're not just talking about finding some kind of cosmic Rosetta Stone here. It's about fundamental physics, their biology, their culture, how they perceive the universe itself. A simple hello is pretty much meaningless if you can't even agree on the nature of space and time. So, to bridge a gap that massive, you've got to take a step back. Before we can even think about understanding their words, we need some kind of universal blueprint for how any intelligence interacts with its environment. How does it name things? How does it measure stuff? And how does it ultimately build its world? And it turns out we might actually have a tool for this. A framework for this already exists, drawn from the science of form. It suggests that any technological culture, doesn't matter if it builds pyramids or hypercubes, leaves behind a set of deeply intertwined clues. And this right here is our key, the cultural triplet. The idea is that for any society, these three things, the words they use, the standards they agree upon, and the objects they make, are all locked in a constant feedback loop. They define each other, they stabilize each other over time. You just can't fully understand one without the others. So the process works kind of like this. First, a culture names things. It develops words for quantities and forms. Then, it uses those names to create standards so it can measure the world consistently. And finally, it uses those measurements to shape physical artifacts with predictable, repeatable geometry. And you can see this all over our own history. We named a unit after a body part, the foot. That name became a standardized measure, like a ruler. And that ruler was then used to shape everything from plots of land to the bricks in our buildings. Name, measure, shape. It's a loop. And what's really important to get is that it's not a simple one-way street. This quote here just nails it. Our language, our technology, and our rules all co-evolve. The words we use are shaped by the tools we can build, and the tools we build are constrained by the words and standards we have. It's a dynamic, living system. So now we have our analytical tool, the cultural triplet. Let's apply it to our subject, an intelligent species that doesn't just think in more than 3 dimensions, but actually physically exists in them. And this is where the thought experiment gets really, really cool. We're taking a framework built on human history, and we're pointing at something fundamentally alien. So how would the triplet work for them? To even begin to imagine their world, we need a good analogy. Think of a flat 2D chessboard. Now, to get to a 3D Rubik's Cube, you basically lift that 2D plane into a third dimension. All of a sudden, the amount of information and complexity you can store in that same footprint just explodes. It's exponential. Now, just try to imagine doing that again. And this is the truly mind-bending implication. A being with real physical extension into a 4th or 5th spatial dimension wouldn't just be smarter. Their very physical body could function like a biological hard drive with almost infinite capacity, storing vast amounts of information in what appears to us as a totally finite space. All right, so let's get practical. Let's say we find an artifact they left behind, a tool, a data crystal, anything. How can we use our name, measure, shape toolkit to decode it? Let's start with name. So many of our basic units are tied directly to our 3D bodies, the foot, the cubit. Their language for measurement would likely be just as embodied. But what in the world does a handspan even mean for a being whose limbs can move through a 4th spatial dimension we can't even see? Next up, measure. Our entire system of physics is built on quantities like length, mass, and time. But would those be fundamental to their reality? Their standardized units might measure properties we literally don't have words for, like hypervolume or dimensional curvature. You can kind of think of that last one as the way their extra dimensions might bend or fold in on themselves. It's wild. To make this a bit more concrete, think about how we might catalog a unit of measurement in a database. For something like the meter, we'd need a field for the concept it measures, in this case, length. We'd need a dimension vector to show how it relates to our fundamental quantities, length, mass, and time, and we'd define how it's measured. It's basically a database entry for a piece of our physical reality. And that brings us to the ultimate question. To describe their world, what new fundamental dimensions, what new columns in this cosmic database would they need? Their version of this table might have vectors for L, M, T, and then something else entirely, a quantity we can't even perceive. And finally, shape. For us, the simplest, most efficient shapes are things like rectangles and circles. They're easy to describe, easy to produce. But for a being that builds in 4 spatial dimensions, the most elegant and modular shape might be a tesseract. That's a 4D cube, or a hypersphere. Their everyday architecture would look like impossible geometry to us. Okay, let's pull back from the hypothetical for a moment and consider what this whole exercise really tells us. So here's the really big idea. This feedback loop between naming, measuring, and shaping might be a universal signature of any intelligence that physically interacts with its world. Any species that manipulates its environment to build complex things could follow the same pattern, no matter how many dimensions they do it in. This is a potential blueprint for technological life anywhere in the universe. And that leaves us with one last, kind of provocative thought. If this framework can give us a strategy for analyzing a hypothetical alien, what does it reveal when we turn that lens back on ourselves? As our technology advances, as we start manipulating things at the quantum and digital levels, how are our own names, measures, and shapes evolving right now? What will they say about us to an intelligence 1,000 years from now?